I remember looking back, and my precious son was in the back seat sitting next to our drug dealer who had track marks all over his arms, and just talking to him like it was normal, not knowing what a pit of despair we were living in. And it was the first time I had ever seen that with clear eyes, and just the reality and the gravity of what I had done. My name is Erika, and I would like to share my redemption story with you. I was born into a Christian home. Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to be a wife and a mom. When I was 21 years old, I met the man who would later become my husband. We got married when I was 24, and our first son was born shortly thereafter. About a year after our first son was born, we got pregnant again, and that pregnancy ended in a miscarriage, which was really painful. I remember being discharged from the hospital with a prescription for narcotic pain medication, and it was the first time in my life that I had ever taken a pain medication for anything other than physical pain. I realized I was taking it because my heart hurt so bad. In May of 2015, I was introduced to heroin as a cheaper substitute. Heroin quickly took everything that I had to give and left me completely bankrupt. In the fall of 2015, my addiction really began to spiral out of control, and there was a day where I had gotten so high that I wasn't able to pick my son up from school because I'd fallen asleep, and the school had to call my mom to pick him up. And I think this was the last straw for my mom, and she knew that she had to say something. Around the end of November of 2015, my mom took me out to lunch, and she just told me, like, "Kiddo, I don't know what's going on with you, but your life's a wreck." She asked me if I was on drugs, and I told her no. And inside, I was so offended that she would even ask that. I went home. I began crying because I realized how much of a disaster my life was. And then those tears ended up as me weeping at the feet of Jesus and telling him everything that I'd done, and that I couldn't fix it. But if he would have me, I was his, but this was the best that I ever had to offer. And I went to bed that night, and I smoked heroin before I went to bed. And I woke up the next morning and I smoked heroin. But this began the story of Jesus rescuing me. God began to show me his love for me through my family. My dad would tell me over the next several months, over and over and over again, that he loved the Erika that was, not the Erika that I thought I had to be. I began praying, and they were really basic and self-centered prayers, oftentimes, praying that I wouldn't get sick before I could get high the next time. But I was also praying for peace because I didn't know what else to pray for. But I knew that God heard me. February 16th of 2016 was the day that it all changed. I told my husband at the time, I said, we need help. We can't keep doing this. He said, what do you suggest? He said, well, we need to tell my parents. So later that afternoon, we drove to my parents' house, and my two sisters who live in Colorado Springs met us there. And I sat on my parents' couch And I said, I'm addicted to heroin. Can you please help me? And my parents said they were so proud of me, which is strange to hear when you tell someone you're addicted to heroin. My mom Googled what to do when your daughter's addicted to heroin, and El Paso County Detox came up. So the decision was made for us to go to El Paso County Detox to physically withdraw from heroin. My parents take me to El Paso County Detox, and my mom is in the intake room with me, and at this point, it had been, 12 or 13 hours since I had last used, and I was really starting to feel unwell and withdrawal, and so I wasn't talking a bunch, very sedated. My mom was answering the majority of the questions for me, and one of the questions the gentleman asked was, what is she on? And my mom said, heroin. And I will never forget, he puts down his pen, turns his seat towards my mom, and says, I'm so sorry, they don't recover. And I just remember hearing that and thinking, he has no idea. There is no other option. And my mom looked at me after he left, and she said, you're my baby, and you're fierce. And I went to bed that night in a foreign place, unsure of what the next day held. But I was so full of hope, because I knew no matter what, I didn't ever have to do drugs again. And I knew that God had delivered me. So I woke up my first morning in detox, and I realized, detox only lasts 3 days. What do I do? My parents picked me up from detox and took me to the sober home. I didn't realize it when I agreed to live in this sober home, but it was only about 5 minutes away from my parents' house. And also, it was one of the only sober homes in town where they allow children to stay the night, one night a week. After living in the sober home for about 4 months, the boys and I were able to move in to an apartment, just the three of us. I used to wake up in the middle of the night and I couldn't fall back asleep. So I started waking up and journaling and reading my Bible. And I knew that the Bible said that if you seek God with all your heart, you'll find him. And that was my mission. I would tell him over and over again, I'm seeking you, let me find you. And I would just pray and cry and beg for the lives of my children and the souls of my children, that their life would not be determined by my choices, that God would redeem them and heal their hearts and their lives, and that this wouldn't be the last chapter of our story. It was during my darkest moment, when I had no hope, that God showed his extravagant love for me. He picked me up and carried me out of my grave. He made beauty from the ashes of my life. I'm grateful for my scars. They are his story of rescue, deliverance, redemption, and victory. My scars are the story of God's love for me. Cry out to Jesus. He's waiting. And he's always been there. It might not happen overnight, but he's faithful. And you can do it. You're fierce.